were to follow after Jesus. This is nothing new to them, okay? So Jesus preaches to the crowd, and he says, if anyone comes to me, what does that mean? If anyone comes to me, what are you going to go to Jesus for? Well, Jesus, I got this rocking chair. It's not rocking. It's kind of off-center a little bit. You going to go to Jesus for carpentry advice? Not likely. Why do you go to Jesus? You go to Jesus because he offers life, and he offers forgiveness, and he offers healing, all of which he offers everlasting. And that's exactly what you get when you follow after Jesus. You receive life everlasting. So Jesus is specifically talking to a crowd who is attempting to follow him. And let's first note that the decision should not be a hasty one. Look at verses 28 through 32. And when I read these metaphors, there's three different metaphors here. The builder, the king, and the salt. When I read these metaphors, notice the contemplation of the decision-making process that's going on. Notice the person who's sitting down and they're thinking of this decision, okay? Notice what they're thinking about, the decision process, okay? Verse 28 through 30. For which of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, this man began to build but was not able to finish. What a foolish person. We might call it stupid, but I can't say that in the pulpit. What person sits down and does not calculate the cost of building a tower, or any structure, for that matter, of great costs, without first sitting down and, do I have the funds to complete it? Or else, while he's halfway on his way, people are going to see him pointing at him and say, he never enough to finish. He laid a foundation, was not able to do anything else. Same is made of your decision-making process with following after Jesus. Sit down and calculate the cost, is what Jesus is saying. That's what the metaphor he's using. He's going to give another metaphor. The king. Look at verses 31 through 32. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will he not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. What on earth? What kind of odds? I mean, seriously. You've got to have some really strong 10,000 men to go up against 20,000. Okay? Sit down, calculate the cost, and if you figure out that your 10,000 can't be his 20,000, ask for terms of peace. Duh, Jesus. Same is to be made with your decision-making process. Verses 34 and 35. Now these are the two verses that are probably going to trip us up the most. So you have to kind of follow along with me a little bit. Therefore, salt is good. But if even salt has become tasteless, or in your text lost its saltiness, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Now what on earth does this mean? Salt losing its saltiness? I've got no idea what this means. Well, others have their opinions. I'm gonna let you know that $100,000 education allows me to do this. But when I look at the Greek verb for become in our English language, when we look at this Greek verb and we match it up with every other instance it's found in the New Testament, it simply means to act foolish. It's the Greek word moraino. Moraino. It's a Greek verb and it means to act foolish. So for salt to become tasteless, it's like salt acting foolishly and losing its taste. What does that mean? What other reason are you use salt for? Well, excuse me. Well, you take the salt and you throw it on your sidewalk. Jill, can you go give me some water, please? Thank you. Take this. You take the salt and you throw it on your sidewalk. Well, wait a minute. You know you don't, because they don't have snow in the first century. You don't have a sidewalk. The reason why you have salt is so that you can season something with it. Now, if salt has to it becomes foolish and acts foolishly and loses its saltiness, loses its taste, what good is it? Why is a filet mignon so darn good? Because it tastes so darn good. It's great. And it's a salty sometimes, too. That's why ham is. Like a ham, too. But what's the point of filet mignon if it's dropped down to its T-bone status or to its hamburger status? It's become useless. You don't have to put a $26 value on that filet mignon at O'Charlie's or wherever you go eat. You don't have to do that. So it's the same way. Your decision-making process when you decide to follow after Jesus, when you decide to be a disciple of Christ, should be the exact same thing. Don't act foolish. Sit down, consider the cost, because that's what Jesus asks you to do. And it's really funny because when you understand exactly what Jesus asked you to do, especially within these verses, it makes more sense. Jesus says, and you probably heard me emphasize when I read the text, and we'll continue to go. But Jesus says that there are three things that you have to do, requirements, so to speak. And if you don't do these three things, you cannot be my disciple. That's what he says. He's not saying this to his apostles. He's saying this to the crowd, people who are attempting to follow after Jesus. He says, if you do not do these three things, you cannot be my disciple. These aren't suggestions, okay? These aren't if you feel like doing them. Hey, if you'd like to be a super Christian, do a couple of these, okay? It's not like that. These are, if you want to be my disciple, you have to do these three things. Now, I told myself that I would never preach a three-point sermon, but the day has come. Here you go, your first requirement. Verse 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now, it is obvious that Jesus taught a message of love, right? Especially within the household. He said, obey your father and mother. So when Jesus says hate here, what does he really mean? Jesus is emphasizing his point. Okay? He taught two things throughout his entire ministry. Love God, love people. Everything else, if it gets in the way of that, don't do it. That's why he had such a problem with people on the Sabbath. Why do you put the Sabbath up there so high? Who cares? If the Sabbath keeps you from loving God or loving people, don't obey the Sabbath, is what he's saying. But anyway, side note. Thank you, my love. Welch's grape juice. It's water. What a disappointment. Very good. So Jesus taught this message of love, and this is what he's saying. If you want to be my disciple, you have to have everything else, everyone else, at a distant second in comparison to me. So much so, you're to love me so much that to everyone else it looks like hate. That you hate your father and mother, and you hate even your own life. Some pretty strong words, right? Second requirement for following Jesus is that you have to carry the cross. Look at verse 27. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me, he cannot be my disciple. Now, in the Matthew account, when the gospel writer notes this, he says, whoever wishes to come after me must pick up his cross daily and follow me. And I like that. But please understand that this picking up your cross and carrying it, it's not a call of persecution. It's a call to something greater. It's a call to strict, absolute, total 100% obedience to Jesus, even to the point of death. So if martyrdom would be the result of you following Jesus, if your life would be to you following Jesus, Jesus says, I want you to be obedient to me and not to death. In India, where there's real persecution of Christians that take place, I'm talking real persecutions, there's a guy I know, his name's Dr. J. Henry, him and his son-in-law, they do preaching in India. And he's from India, so that's what allows him to preach in India. But he says that before he makes a disciple of Christ, before he baptizes somebody, he makes sure that they know this very fundamental fact. Are you ready for this? He says, I just want to let you know, before I baptize you, you will be persecuted.